Hello, everyone, and I want to wish everyone a very happy and safe Memorial Day. I'm here to read from chapter 2 of my book, The Cause. Memorial Day is a very fitting day to read this, even though one of the battles in here, Gettysburg, took place in July, but it is still a very fitting time to read this as we are memorializing and remembering all of those servicemen and women who fought for us and did not make it back from the battles that they fought. So here we go. Let's dive right into chapter 2. It seemed a lifetime before anyone talked to me. Soldiers came and went and never even glanced my way, deliberately ignoring me. There were no other women in the camp as far as I could see, just men who moved slowly, lazily in the September sun. Some did chores, carrying laundry baskets and armfuls of wood. Others stretched in the rising autumn heat, writing letters or reading. Camp life didn't appear too stressful. It almost belied belief there was a war. Finally, a boy poked his head in. "I've been told to ask you if you want some food or coffee." My stomach growled before I could give the answer. Both would be nice, but I can't eat this way. I nodded toward my bound hands. "Reckon I'll have to feed you. Them's my orders." The soldier was young, fair of face, with blonde hair and blue eyes. His uniform coat was tan, and loose brown suspenders held up ill-fitting trousers. He, too, was missing shoes. He entered the tent with a dented tin plate balanced on his left hand. On it was a pasty yellow clump and a foreign object brown in hue. I watched the dark thing move and could almost picture it crawling on me, and I screamed. In response, the boy dropped the plate. As it fell, its contents, including the uninvited breakfast guests, spilled onto the ground. The boy stamped his foot. "Criminy! Now look what you made me do, damn stupid! What was that thing on the plate?" "Just a critter. You move him out of the way and the food ain't so bad." He motioned with his dirty hands just how to get the job done. My stomach turned over and I thought I might throw up. How could they eat this way and expect to fight a war? It was highly unlikely that the Confederacy could win. "Can you tell me what's going on? I need to get home." "I can't tell you nothing, ma'am. You're a spy, I hear tell." "I am not a spy. You must believe me. This is all a mistake." Leaving the plate of food on the ground, he shrugged his shoulders, turned, and left the tent. I sat heavily in the wooden chair and pictured Charles escaping through the Maryland woods, riding hard on that large horse, connecting with other escaped members of his spy ring. Spy ring. How could I have been so blind? Practically under my nose, my husband had been gaining secrets from the North, selling them to the South, and doing who knew what else. If he got off easy, he would be hanged as a traitor in Washington, but if not, he would be running all his life until he found someone he could trust. Anger welled in me, and all I could think of is that he deserved the worst punishment he could get. I knew it was unchristian for me to think that way. He was my husband, after all. But it was obvious if they connected me with Charles, I would be implicated in his crimes. I needed to find my husband before they did, or my name would never be cleared. I might never see my family again. I might never be able to have children, or travel when there wasn't a war on. Suddenly, my life hung in the balance. I still had things left to do. "Miss Garnett, is it?" I looked up quickly. Tears were brimming in the corner of my eyes. The young man who stood before me reached out and wiped my tears with a handkerchief and then returned it to his pocket. He was olive-skinned. He wore an officer's uniform with a belt buckled over a heavy gray jacket and a black leather pouch slung diagonally across his chest. His coat was dusty but neat. The farther I stayed from my married name, the better. "Yes?" Yellow piping swirled up his sleeves in an intricate design that were similar to clef notes on a sheet of music. He sat authoritatively in a chair across from me. "I hope you haven't been too uncomfortable." "No, I mean, yes. I don't understand why I'm here. I didn't do anything wrong. I apologized to the man back there. I told him I knew I was in the wrong place, I'll say. But he still did this." I nodded to my hands. The young man simply shook his head. I had never felt more insulted. I wasn't lying. Someone had to believe me. "You're putting on a good act, Miss Garnett, but I know you're a spy. You won't be leaving here until you tell me what I need to know. And if you don't tell me, I'll just ship you into the general and, well, you don't want that. Trust me." Who was this general? "I'm not a spy," I yelled. "The book you're writing in tells a different story. Charles is an accomplice or something, maybe the man in charge. That's what I need to know. Who is he, and what do you know of our position? Tell me, and your life could be spared. That's for my journal. It has nothing to do with anyone but me. He dragged the chair close to me and said quietly, tell me the truth, and you won't get hurt. I broke out in a cold sweat. If you honestly think I'm a spy, then you're a fool. In a flash, he removed a tan riding glove from his belt and slapped my cheek with it. Watch your tone. It stung, and I was forced to take a moment to compose myself. I held my hand to my cheek and stared incredulously at him. I had never been threatened before, and certainly never slapped before today. Twice within an hour, sir. I have never been treated this way. Can you at least tell me who you are? I'm Thomas Goree, ma'am, aide-de-camp for the 1st Corps Army of Northern Virginia. If I were a spy, wouldn't I have known that? Who's saying you didn't? I sighed. I don't even know where I am, Major. Tell me where you came from. Connecticut. Today? No, today I came from Baltimore. He nodded silently, and I felt as though anything I said would only persecute me. He looked to be reasonably educated. He must have read a major headline in the newspaper if I had. That doesn't mean I'm a spy, Major. Captain Goree. My apologies, Captain. It's quite a journey from Connecticut to Baltimore. How did you get here? By train. Not to this spot, you didn't. You had to ride in. Yes, we did. Be quiet, Emily. My inner voice told me, you're only making things worse. I was with my husband. You see, we had a disagreement. He left me back there on that road. My face warmed with the humiliation of it. It didn't go unnoticed, and the captain's face softened. I'm sorry about that, ma'am, but he left you in a dangerous place. Do you have any relatives in Maryland? Anyone we can send word to confirm your story? He sounded as though he would let me go, and hope coursed through me. My husband will come back, I'm sure of it. He's on business. What kind of business? How long was this incessant questioning going to last? Would he ever let up? I felt stupid. I don't know, Captain. I don't get involved with my husband's work. All I know is he runs his own company. And what company is that? The Moment of Truth. It could be a banking company. He talks about finances all the time. Goree lifted my hand, still tied to the tent pole. I jumped at his touch. I don't see a wedding ring, Miss Garnett. I took it off last night in our hotel. I must not have put it back on. In truth, I had no idea what happened to it. I couldn't remember removing it. My limbs began to shake. My husband's probably come back for me by now. If I'm not where he left me, heaven knows what he'll do. Goree shook his head and smiled. He then reached over and untied my hands. I can see I'm not getting anywhere with you. My wrists were sore and chafed where the red marks had formed. He took me gently by the arm and led me outside. It was humid, yet I felt cold and clammy. Men formed for drill in the center of the camp, and I could hear the sergeant shouting orders, which the lines quickly obeyed. Where are you taking me? To see the general. He gestured to a tent framed by a large Confederate flag outside. My feet froze. Both the corporal and now Goree had proudly bragged about how harsh the general could be, and I could not go graciously to the slaughter. I felt as though I would be sick. Come on, his grip tightened. Get moving. Please, you're hurting me. I hoped my yells would cause a scene, perhaps bring anyone to my rescue. I've got rights. Goree was angry, and his Colt 1851 Navy came out of its holster and poked mercilessly into my side. I said, get moving. He emphasized his point with a shove. A neatly made cot came at me, and I lost my footing inside the tent. I fell to one knee, striking the right corner of the desk on the way down. Papers floated to the floor, and pain exploded in my shoulder. He lunged, and I somehow scrambled to my feet into a standing position. TJ, came a slow southern drawl. That's enough. The captain snapped to attention and gave the man at the door a salute. The man saluted back, reached out a hand, and helped me to my feet. Have a seat, Miss Garnett. He gestured to his cot. Thank you, TJ. You are relieved. Yes, sir. Spitting on his foot, Goree left the tent. I was cold in the shade of the tent. The trunk across from me was open, and folded over the side was a gray officer's coat. A nicked armoire was to my left, also open, and inside, white shirts hung on pegs. Above the armoire was an elaborately carved pipe, a box of matches, and a framed picture of a woman surrounded by children. Were they his? Then I looked at him. He was imposing, broadly built, and wore a crisp muslin shirt with a gray vest over regulation blue pants. He bent down, methodically picked up the papers that had fallen from the desk and the tan hat on which I landed. Nearly took care of my hat, he smiled, coaxing it back into shape. I'm sorry, my throat was so dry I could barely speak. Your captain pushed me. Captain Golree gets carried away sometimes, but there is no one else I trust to get the job done. Other than that small display of force, are you all right? I'm afraid you're barking up the wrong tree, General. Oh, forgive me for not introducing myself properly. I'm General James Longstreet. He brandished his hat and bowed slowly. Commander of the 1st Corps, Army of Northern Virginia. I had never met an Army officer, and I had to admit I was impressed. But the charm disappeared quickly. It will go better for you if you told the truth now. There might not be a later. I have been telling the truth. I wish I could believe someone as lovely as you, ma'am, but I'm forced by my better judgment not to. He pulled the desk chair near to me and sat. What Captain Golree may have done will be nothing compared to the punishment you'll receive if you keep up with this game. You're obviously a Yankee, and one found right in the middle of a Confederate picket line. You were carrying a book filled with very peculiar notes. If you were in my shoes, Miss Garnett, what would you believe? I looked to the canopy above and tried not to cry. My shoulder throbbed and a headache had formed over my left eye. My husband and I had a disagreement. He deserted me by your picket line. That's what I told your captain, and it's the truth. Where did you see what your book describes? I was confused, unable to remember what I wrote only hours earlier. My book only describes the woods, I think. Before that, there's more information about a city, it sounds like. Oh, that's when I was in Baltimore. It meant nothing. Longstreet laughed. His long beard and thick mustache covered much of his face, but his teeth were straight and white when he smiled. He was a handsome man. Try again, Miss Garnett. General Richard Garnett is a cousin of mine. If I could I don't remember Dick mentioning any northern relatives. If you'll only take me to him, please take me to him. Did I sound as desperate as I felt? He leaned toward me. You're in no position to make demands. I'll ask again. Where did you see what your book describes? I could not answer. I was at a loss as to what to say next. No one was going to believe that I was anything but a spy captured in enemy territory. My story about Garnett wasn't working, and neither was my story about a husband who deserted me, though for all intents and purposes, that one was true. My only choice was escape, to find my way back to the road and pray that Charles felt guilty enough to return before I was hanged. I need to stretch my legs. Can I? I won't let you walk alone, but I'll grant your request. Major Sorrel? A different young man entered the tent. He was neat where Gorey was dusty, close-shaven where the captain was not. Sorrel had a small mustache and a ghost of a goatee. The kepi on his head was slouched, fashionably close over his eyes. Field glasses in a case hung off his belt. Yes, sir, General. Miss Garnett needs to stretch her legs. Accompany her on a walk around the camp. Yes, sir, right this way, Miss Garnett. We walked shoulder to shoulder slowly around the perimeter of the camp. Sorrel was a gentleman, talking trivialities with me, showing me the mess tent, the surgeon's station, the post office, and then stopping near the common area as the troops continued to drill. He informed me that Longstreet was strict about drills and musters between engagements. I noticed the group of trees coming up on our left. It would be the perfect place to run to. They were full, thick pines, dense and dark. I stopped and cleared my throat. Major, I think I dropped my handkerchief back there a ways. Could you get it for me? It's, well, sentimental. Of course, I'll only be a moment. As soon as he strayed, I bolted like lightning into the trees. It was easy at first, until I tripped 2-3 times over roots jutting from the ground. I was able to regain my balance, but lost precious time. Then the first bullet whizzed by my ear. Soon another hit a branch right above my head, showering pine needles on me. It took everything I had not to scream. Footsteps other than my own were behind me, closer, closer. I could see the light at the end of the woods. I was almost there. My body was not my own as I was pushed down and rolled over crackling leaves. Rifles were positioned against my head, and I struggled to breathe. My hands were wrestled to my back and tied. Strange sounds came from my throat. It was all over now. Come on, spy. Soldiers dragged me back to the waiting Sorrel. Other voices joined in. See if you try that again. Miserable Yankee, make a fool out of us? Not a chance. The shouts were worse than real fists flying at me. I felt crushed, suffocated. As I was thrust towards Sorrel, I noticed the disappointed look on his face just before he stepped aside, letting me fall back to the ground. The soldiers laughed, and one roughly yanked me up. I knew that things would not go easy on me now. I've got her. Thank you, men. You're relieved. Sorrel held tight to my trembling arm. Longstreet stood in the doorway of his tent, arms crossed over his broad chest, cigar in his mouth. He was waiting. He had seen the whole show. Bring her here, Major. Sorrel saluted before he left me with the general. Longstreet was too calm, too deliberate. It scared me. That was a stupid thing to do, Miss Garnett. I didn't answer. If you ever expected me to believe your story, why did you run? You weren't going to believe me. I had no choice. I didn't know what else to do. He continued as if he hadn't heard. You're only proving your guilt. His face moved close to mine, and he smelled of cigar smoke and lye soap. I could hang you. The general turned then, hands behind his back, and paced his tent. I watched and waited for what seemed like an eternity. I think maybe we should visit General Lee. I can defer you to his judgment. Or I could keep you here. There'll be a fight soon. Maybe I'll let you watch your blueberries being slaughtered, a slaughter that could have included my boys if you had reached your contact. How would that be? My heart pounded. He would not, could not force me to watch a battle. My imagination had already been running wild thanks to the hundreds of vivid newspaper accounts printed in the northern newspapers. The nightmares sometimes kept me awake. What do you think about that? He raised his hand as though he would strike. Good God, woman, why are you silent? Answer me! The general roared. My fear froze me in place. He looked as though he would explode, and his gaze hardened my insides. He was shaking in fury. TJ! Longstreet yelled. Take her away. Find her a tent. The aide did not salute this time, only stared. I was trembling so violently I was unable to stand. Major Gorey picked me up. He muttered something about never before having seen General Longstreet lose his temper in front of a woman. In moments, we were inside an empty tent, and he put me on my feet. Longstreet paced, kicked his desk chair, heard the leg splinter, paced again. Damn! What had gotten into him? He never behaved that way before. He had been raised never to behave that way at all. He relived the scene over and over again, as if they were stages of a battle. First, the reconnaissance, TJ's questioning of the prisoner, and then the advance, her clever evasion. Then, of course, the main battle, the full-scale interrogation, and finally, a retreat. Her escape. He had done everything possible to make her comfortable, offered her food, allowed her to walk when and where she wanted, extended to her every hospitality, and yet she betrayed him. But then she was only a spy, so what did it matter? Oddly, though, somehow it did matter. He knew because the whole thing left a bad taste in his mouth. Why would he have expected nothing more from a spy trash? Why, then, did he feel so guilty? Longstreet saw Goree walking quickly past his tent and sensed something in the young staff officer. Was TJ as confused by the prisoner as he was? Did he look down on the commanding officer for his distasteful display of emotion? Captain, Goree stopped and backed up. Yes, sir? How is she? She ain't saying much. Well, let me know. I will, sir. The general saluted and leaned against the pole that held his tent upright. If his wife had seen this behavior with Emily Garnett, she would have left him. Something crawled inside his usually stolid soul, something peculiar. He didn't not believe the young woman. As a matter of protocol, he had no proof either for or against her case. But something inside him said there was more to her story. He was tired. That had to explain why she had frustrated him so easily. Couldn't she have tried to help herself? Couldn't she see that she was forcing him to kill her? He did not want another drop of blood on his hands. Grabbing his coat and hat, he briskly left his tent and walked up the hill, past the orchards, barn, and fields to his horse. The brown mare was tied inside a split rail fence. Marie, Sorrel, Fairfax, Manning, and Culling all kept their horses there as well. Eyes gleamed in the late afternoon sunlight, acting as beacons for him to slowly climb the fence and mount up. "Where are you going, sir?" Sorrel appeared next to him, as in the uncanny way he had, and held Hero's bridle in his hand. "Out of my way, Major." "Sir, let go of my horse, son, and keep an eye on the prisoner. Make sure she stays put this time. I'll be back directly." Sorrel's face did not mask his confusion. Longstreet was never one for spontaneous acts. Just taking his horse for an afternoon ride was not in his nature. It had to do with a woman. He knew it. Who was this Emily Garnett, and why, in such a short period of time, had she turned the camp upside down? So that's all of the next chapter. So I will be back soon to read chapter 3. Bye.